Welcome back to the BSD preview show, this time previewing Minnesota. As always, I'm your host, Patrick Kerbley, joined by Tim Aiden. Tim, we are not live streaming this one. We are recording this, but we're recording at our normal time on Wednesday. So it's currently halftime of the Penn State basketball game. They're trailing to the Purdue Fort Wayne Mastodons, 47-41, I believe. So Tim, please, knowing that this is going to come out Thursday, please explain. Well, we'll have you explain two things. First, explain how Penn State was able to come back and win. Go ahead.
Well, they started playing defense for real. That was just a lazy, lethargic first half defensive effort on their part. And also no reason to allow a team that you have a significant height advantage on to get 11 offensive rebounds in a half. That can't happen. And I know Purdue Fort Wayne's a good 3-point shooting team, so that's going to happen. But just unfortunate Penn State's missing a bunch of wide open shots. But those should start falling in the second half as part of their comeback win. They're facing a little adversity, so we'll see how they respond.
All right, now explain why they lost. And this is unacceptable, and should we fire Mike Rhodes for this loss?
Unacceptable, but no, don't fire Mike Rhodes, because as the great John Rothstein would say, anarchy? Nope, just college basketball.
It would be very Penn State basketball. Finally get some votes, top 25, first time in a long time. We were just talking prior to the show, first time they've even received the votes since they were ranked during Chambers last year before COVID. So, yeah, would
Actually,
be very
the
Penn State.
Rothstein tweet would be Penn State loses a bye game to Purdue Fort Wayne, the epitome of brutality.
The epitome of brutality, indeed. Penn State basketball, folks. Anyway, so those listening and watching, you already know what happened with Penn State basketball, so we don't have to live in fantasy land for that anymore. We are here to talk football, Penn State football, because Penn State is ranked number 4 in the country, much to the dismay of media members and SEC fans and just general SEC shills, I guess you would say. But Penn State remains ranked number 4 in the college football playoff. If you want my college football playoff thoughts, you can go to see previous video that I posted, which was Tuesday night when I live streamed the college football committee rankings release. So you can go check that out. Not too much has changed, so we're just going to continue on here and talk about Penn State's upcoming game against Minnesota. Before we get to the Gophers, though, a little bit of housekeeping to take care of as far as Penn State's practice tonight. Again, that would be Wednesday night that we're recording this. Elliott Washington, cornerback Elliott Washington, and this is all from Lyle Allenstein, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, of the Daily Collegian. So thank you, Lyle, for this tweet. Elliott Washington left the Purdue game, and he was not seen at practice tonight. Jalen Harvey, true freshman defensive end, who I'm extremely high on, he looked like he tore his ACL during the Purdue game, but he is at practice tonight. So whatever happened with his hyperextension in his knee, apparently nothing tore. There are no bruises or sprains or any other scientific terms you can think of. So good sign there. And as far as guys that played in the Purdue game, didn't seem like there was any injuries. Julian Fleming, not at practice tonight. Tim, do any of those speak to you as far as Minnesota goes? I guess Julian Fleming, being that he is a starting wide receiver, is probably the one that catches the eye the most. And specifically because we had thought that he was healthy going into tonight.
Yeah, I'd say that's the most surprising one to me. I had no idea Julian was banged up at all. I don't remember him leaving the Purdue game hurt or anything. So who knows what's going on with him. But I guess it's not, if he doesn't play Saturday, and I guess there's an opportunity for somebody else to step up. I know people keep saying Tyser Denmark's name, the true freshman who's supposedly been the best of the freshman receivers, but I don't know. That's obviously you'd rather have Fleming available than not, but if not, then next person up. I mean, it's not like the receiver room has been lighting it on fire this year, so
Yeah, and we'll talk more about Fleming, kind of his impact on this game, just because I believe that Penn State, as they go into most games, but specifically against Minnesota, will look to really run the ball. And, say what you want about Fleming as like a pass catcher and a receiver in that sense, but really good run blocker, guy that, gives his all every single play. So that might change things a little bit for Penn State. Maybe we see more. I mean, we already see a lot of 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets, but maybe you see them go to Dinkins and Luke Reynolds coming off a really nice game against Purdue. Maybe you see Penn State go to those 2 guys more. But we will talk more about that when we get to Minnesota, which, you know what, I think that we can get to right now. I don't think we have any other updates as far as it was just those 3 guys. James Franklin did make mention after practice in his recap with the media that the Big Ten and the SEC are the 2 best conferences. I was a little surprised to hear him say that. Not that it's a surprising take. I think anyone with eyes would know that the Big Ten and the SEC are the 2 best conferences, but just kind of surprising to see him talk about that during the season. I imagine that would have been a question that he would stray away from. But other than that, not too much to take away from tonight's practice session. So we can get right into Minnesota. Minnesota, who is, Tim, what is the record? 6-4.
6-4.
I want to say 6-4.
Yep.
Minnesota's 6-4. They've been, pretty impressive overall in the year. I think Minnesota wasn't exactly touted to be, a contender in the Big Ten, and not to say that they are a contender, but probably having a better year than people expected. Tim, do you want to start with Minnesota's offense or Minnesota's defense here? And we can kind of piece together what to expect from the Gophers.
Well, I say we can start on the offensive side. The quarterback, Max Brosmer, he's a transfer from New Hampshire,
Yes.
and he's been pretty decent for them on the year. 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Has almost identical total yards throwing as Drew Aller, 2,251. Drew's got 2,253. So, and also the similar touchdown interception ratio. Drew's got 16-5 to Brosmer's 14-4. So, so he's been good for them. And then their running back, Darius Taylor, he's very key to their offense. If they can't get the run game going, that's when they find themselves in trouble. But he's a guy that, Penn State, with their stingy run defense, I would hope would be able to keep him in check. So I do know they do like to use him in the passing game too sometimes. So, that's a count for him for sure. Daniel Jackson, that's their star receiver. He's been pretty good for them. 712 yards, 3 touchdowns. So he's a guy that secondary will have to keep an eye on. And Elijah Spencer, other guy to keep an eye on receiving wise. So they do have some guys on offense you have to respect. But that being said, they actually rank 17th out of 18 teams in running the football, which is a little surprising to read that. So there's a golden opportunity here for Penn State's D-line and really the front 7 to just keep that ground game halted, and for the D-line by themselves to just generate pressure on Max Brosmer. As if Penn State can jump out to a couple score lead early on and force Brosmer to have to throw the ball 35, 40 times in order to try to bring Minnesota back, I'd like Penn State's chances there. So
it's a weird Minnesota team. I mean, it's sort of what you expect from PJ Fleck as far as time of possession and defensive led and just kind of being a living embodiment of what the Big Ten West was, of the Iowas and the Wisconsins and even Illinois, of just trying to muddy it up and stay in games and see if you can win that way. They do throw more than they pass this year, and you kind of mentioned it before. When you think of Minnesota, you think of the 6.
Did you mean they run more when they pass, or they?
No, they pass more than they run.
Oh, you said they throw more than they pass. Sorry.
What did I say? Did I say
they throw more than they pass?
I meant they pass more than they run. Sorry. Yeah, so they pass more than they run. It's a 53-47 split, which I think, when you think of Minnesota, you wouldn't necessarily think that. But with Brosmer, him being a pretty good transfer from New Hampshire, and just the receivers that they have, Daniel Jackson, Elijah Spencer, you mentioned those guys. Daniel Jackson, is a really talented wide receiver, 63 receptions. him and Spencer are big bodies that Penn State are going to have to account for. But let's make no mistake about it, whether it's throwing the ball, whether it's running the ball, Minnesota does not have a very good offense. If they're going to win this game, it's going to be defensively. So I think if you're Penn State, you want to make sure that you don't let someone like Daniel Jackson get hot in the passing game and let him beat you. And you want to take away the run, which they've done a really good job of just about every single game. I think other than the USC game, they've done a pretty good job of shutting down or limiting teams running the ball. I guess Ohio State was a little bit of a mixed bag, especially there at the end. But it's tough to see scenarios of Minnesota, scoring, getting into the high 20s or getting into the low 30s. If Minnesota wins this game, it's going to be a low scoring affair, and one where they kind of just are able to somehow bleed the clock. Do want to mention, as far as Minnesota's offense goes, and this is going to be the case. I mean, we talked about it when we talked about Illinois. We talked about when we talked about Wisconsin. Brosmer's a good quarterback. He's not very good when you get pressure on him, which is going to be the case with almost any quarterback. So once again, for Penn State, really important that Abdul Carter and Deni Dennis Sutton and even the defensive tackles, Izzard, etc., that those guys get after Brosmer, because if you're able to get after Brosmer, you're able to stop the run, Minnesota's offense is going to struggle to do much of anything. So, like we're saying, this Minnesota defense is kind of where they can potentially win this game. So, Tim, what are some things that we like about Minnesota's defense and where they could give Penn State some issues?
Well, Minnesota is a team that's it's averaging 1.5 interceptions a game. So they have a very opportunistic secondary, led by guys like Coy Perch and Justin Wally, Kerry Brown. So, that being said, Drew Aller is not a very interception prone quarterback. He's pretty good overall at taking care of the ball. And Minnesota, from my understanding, plays a lot of zone coverage. So should be opportunities for Tyler Warren or someone amongst receivers to find a hole in the zone and Drew to, just get the ball to him. So I don't think Drew's going to get baited into trying to take any unnecessary deep shots if they're not there. But the key is going to be for Penn State against this defense, get that run game going. They can get Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, get Tyler Warren or Bo Prabula to rip off a couple nice runs. It can definitely put Minnesota back on their heels. And also, Drew may have to complete a few passes to get Minnesota to ease off the run a little bit. It's going to be it's going to take a good balanced attack, but they will definitely need to have a run game going. If they have to, be one-dimensional and have to throw it around a bunch, then, this could be a closer game than we'd like it to be. And also got to take care of the football. That's the other key thing. I mean, this Minnesota team thrives off turnovers. That's how they muddy up games. That's how they, stay in games against teams they probably have no business beating. And, if this is going to be another, if this ends up being a nail biter of a contest, it's going to be because Minnesota's defense was able to, come up with a couple turnovers.
What do you think is more likely, that Penn State wins this game, right? When we come on here after the game, are we talking about, it being a Drew Aller masterclass? Are we talking about, all around tight end Tyler Warren? Are we talking about the running game? Like what do you think is going to kind of carry the day for Penn State offensively if they win the game?
Oh, I think we're going to talk about how Drew Aller did a solid job, just finding the open man, taking care of the ball, taking off and running when, the pressure was getting to him, or if he realized nobody was open, he just tucked and ran and picked up that first down, moved the chains. That's going to be a real key. Can't turn the ball over. I think for the most part, really all season long, the exception maybe being USC, and threw 3 interceptions, and frankly, only one of those was really Drew's fault. I think the other ones were just kind of like tip balls that just ended up in wrong hands. But he's otherwise done a really good job taking care of the ball this year. So I think he does that. We're talking about a Penn State winning by a couple touchdowns. That, and of course Tyler Warren has had another solid game. Doesn't have to be like world beater type performance like he had against USC, but he caught some balls, he ripped off a few nice runs, probably scored a touchdown or two. So that's probably what we're looking at. And the run game, I think Singleton and Allen, they had their moments. Maybe didn't rip off any truly explosive gains, but they ripped off some decent runs when they needed to and kept Minnesota on its heels. So that's probably going to be the storyline.
So you kind of lean towards the pass more than the run?
Well, I mean, I'd say, it definitely has to be a run game, but it's also also important that Drew takes care of the ball. So it's really both. I mean, I don't think it's an either or. It's got to be both.
Yeah, and you're probably right.
I don't think Minnesota's defense you can be one-dimensional against. What I'm trying to say.
For sure.
Like
I guess I'm more looking at it. I guess I'm just more looking at it from, I don't know. I just more so think like when you look at Minnesota's defense, so right they're you mentioned like the turnovers, they're really good at causing turnovers first in the Big Ten. Specifically, that's interceptions. So they have 16 interceptions that leads the Big Ten. So you look at a stat like that, and you made mention that Drew, certainly last year and even this year, he's done a good job at taking care of the ball. Having five interceptions going into the 11th game of the season is pretty good, all things considered. And like you made mention to, right, in that USC game, a couple of those were batted balls. I mean, the one was a Hail Mary that, that's not like a true interception in the sense of him like trying to like force something in like a bad spot. He has to throw that up. Even against Ohio State, I mean, that's a ball that Trey Wallace needs to catch, or at least make sure the Ohio State defender doesn't catch it. But I just look at Minnesota's defense and the fact that I think the reason that they are where they are is because they have gotten those interceptions in particular. So not to say that I think Penn State turtles up and they don't look to pass, because Drew has, as we come on here after most games and say how well Drew played. Drew certainly deserves the benefit of the doubt when it comes to, being able to run your offense as normal. You don't have to drastically change anything, or you don't have to try to hide Drew Aller. But I do think that when you look at Minnesota's defense, 9th in the Big Ten in rush and rush defense as far as yards per attempt, 3.74. So bottom half of the Big Ten, and they're 13th in the Big Ten in allowing 10-yard runs, which is once again pretty low there in the Big Ten. So I think when you look at that Minnesota defense and where their holes are the most, it's more so in the running attack, and just knowing how Andy Kotelnicki is, what his offense wants to do. It's like most really good offenses, right? It's running the ball. So I would lean more towards us coming on here after the game and talking about, Nick Singleton, blasted off a 44-yard run in the second quarter, or, Katron Allen had 17 carries for 98 yards or whatever it might be. Not that it's going to drastically be like a 300-yard rushing game versus a 300-yard passing game or something like that, but I kind of do lean more with the rushing attack against Minnesota.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being a possibility too, where they just lean on the run game and try to, and of course throw when necessary. I guess we'll see on Saturday what happens.
As you've taken a look and researched Minnesota more this week, just knowing that Penn State was going to be playing them, and we have this podcast, we have to do a little bit of research ahead of time. Did it make you like? Are you? We've been saying for a while now that this Minnesota game, I'd say for a while now, but I guess ever since the Ohio State game, so past couple of weeks, that this Minnesota one is probably the one that scares people the most. Even going into the Washington game, it was still Minnesota seems like the game that if Penn State trips up, it's going to be Minnesota. Are you any more nervous than you were, the last couple of weeks, or are you now more confident in Penn State coming out with a win? I assume that you do have Penn State winning. I think most people have Penn State winning.
I do, and I obviously will do our predictions, I guess, in a little bit. But I still maintain, if Penn State was going to trip up post Ohio State, this was the game that it would happen, and that hasn't changed for me. But what has changed is my confidence in Penn State winning this game and covering. In fact, I think the way they've just beat up on Washington and Purdue, and the way they've looked focused, like they weren't going to let that Ohio State game get to them. Like they were, they know their hopes and dreams, their national title hopes are still very much alive. If they win out, secure that playoff spot, get that first round home game at Beaver Stadium in late December. So it's all on the table, and they know it. They're playing like a team that knows it. And, I don't see them about to drop the ball this coming Saturday. And I guess maybe we'll get into it in the prediction too, but obviously the dynamics, the teams, pretty much the coaching staffs, even except for the head coaches, are just different from 2019. This is not 2019. Rashad Bateman's not walking through that door.
Who Penn State offensive coordinator Ricky Ronnie, right? That was Ronnie's last. Yeah, that was Ronnie's last season because Shiraka came in the year after. So, that is the funny thing when people mention like even like going into Wisconsin game, right? We mentioned how Penn State hadn't lost to Wisconsin in so many years, and you look back the last like 15 years, and how Penn State has had a pretty good record against Wisconsin. But it's like what Joe Paterno did against Wisconsin has like no impact on today, right? When it was Joe Paterno versus Barry Alvarez back in the day. So, certainly agree on that end of things. And that's, we've kind of touched on this in past episodes, but I do think that so much of Penn State fans' worry is from that stupid 2019 game. And just, right, that's our lasting memory of going into what it's some sort of bank stadium. I don't know what bank it's named after.
TCF Bank Stadium.
Is it TCF? Okay. I want to say TCF, but then I was like, hold on. Is it Tariq Castro Fields Bank Stadium? Either way.
Actually, Pat, they've changed the name again. It's Huntington Bank Stadium now.
Right. Huntington Bank Stadium. Knew it was a bank, though. Either way, point being that, I think Penn State fans going into this, one, it just being an away game compared to, the Washington game. I think if Minnesota was a home game, Washington was the away game, Washington would have got a lot more of the ire of, oh, we might drop this one. But the more I research Minnesota, and this is the part where, man, if they lose, you can clip this and make me look real stupid. But I mean, it's not a team that Penn State should lose to, especially for what you mentioned before, like what Penn State's playing for. And those guys are aware, right? As much as James Franklin can do the 1-0 mantra publicly. And I'm not saying that James is, showing the team the bracket, the college football projected bracket of like, here you go, guys. This is the 6 seed. This is the 5 seed. But they know what they're playing for, and they should know. It is like, not to get too far into like a diatribe about this, but James Franklin being like I believe he's a sociology major, right? So the study of people, or maybe a psychology, one of those things. Humans are not robots. Like this idea that the Penn State team is just Minnesota. Minnesota is on your path to what you want to get, and they know what they're playing for, right? It's a reason why a team that is still alive is going to be playing a lot different than a team that is completely eliminated from the playoffs. So they should know what they're playing for. That should make you want to play better. That should make you more focused. So I just look at it in that sense as well. And you mentioned before about what we're talking about here with the playoffs and making sure you win this game so you can get there. Style points are going to matter. How Penn State wins is going to matter. I know we'll get to score predictions here after in a second or two, but Penn State is a 11-point favorite. I know you mentioned that it sounds like you think that Penn State will cover. I think it is, I don't want to say very important that Penn State covers, but it is important that Penn State doesn't go out there and they need a fourth quarter, under 6-minute drive to take the lead against Minnesota. By all means, first and most important thing is winning, but how they win is going to be important too, because yes, Penn State wants to host a playoff game, but when you look at that 6 seed versus the 7 seed, that could be the difference of getting, the ACC, SMU, or Miami in the second round versus getting Texas or Oregon or Ohio State or Alabama, whoever wins the SEC. And yeah, one step at a time. Who knows if Penn State, even wins in the first round, but that type of stuff matters. And James Franklin knows about that. The team knows about this stuff. So yeah, important game, and how they win is going to be important. So what are you thinking score wise? I know you mentioned that you think Penn State covers. So what are you thinking?
My prediction is 31-13 Penn State.
Okay.
I do think it's close for a little while. I think it's maybe a 7 to 10 point halftime lead for Penn State, but I just think the second half they just start to grind down Minnesota. They grind down the D line. Those maybe 2-3 yard gains turn into 6 and 7, and more importantly, the defense. I mean, the D line starts having their way with the O line, and they're getting after Max Brosmer. And Brosmer is not exactly a dual threat guy, so he's somebody they can definitely force into making bad throws or get sacks on him, which who knows, that could lead to turnovers. But I just think Penn State, I like them in the trenches. I just like the way the offense has really been starting to click post Ohio State, and I think that's going to continue. As much as Minnesota will try and make Penn State have to sustain drives in the way of the end zone. I mean, Penn State's showing the ability to do that. So I think I think they can essentially beat Minnesota at their own game. So I'm trying to get at. And so I think ultimately they start pulling away like late third quarter, early fourth, putting the game out of reach. So I'm going to say 31-13 Penn State covers.
I'm in that same area. I have 27-10 Penn State. Like I said before, this Minnesota team, they're just they shouldn't be able to beat Penn State most days. Is it possible? Absolutely. Penn State can lose to anyone not named Purdue or Kent State on their schedule. But you look at this team, you compare them to a Wisconsin, you compare them to an Illinois, because I think they're kind of in that realm of things. But it's hard for me to see a Minnesota team that's 12th in the Big Ten in yards per pass and 15th in the Big Ten in yards per rush really be able to muster up enough anything to really scare Penn State. You go back to that 2019 Minnesota team, and I think you mentioned it before. Rashard Bateman and Tyler Johnson, two guys that are still cashing NFL checks, are not on this Minnesota team. Daniel Jackson's a good wide receiver. Elijah Spencer's a good wide receiver.
No one's mistaking him for Rashad Bateman, though.
Yeah, they're not going to be first round, second round, third round picks. I know Tyler Johnson won like the third or fourth, but Bateman was a first round pick. And even Brosmer, I mean, he's been solid. He's been pretty good at times, but this team just lost to Rutgers 26-19. So is there a nightmare scenario where, Minnesota somehow is, let's say that they get that interception, right? They get a pick six or something like that in the first quarter, and maybe they have an offensive drive that gets them a field goal and they're up 10-0, and all of a sudden PJ Fleck can try to start to bleed the clock the same way that he did in 2019. It's possible, but I just don't think they have the firepower offensively. And if you can't run the ball, it's really tough to beat a team as good as Penn State. So I don't foresee them having success running the ball, because they usually can't. And Penn State is really good at making life even tougher for you in that respect. So yeah, I think Penn State does what they need to do. I think this team is a little bit more locked in than they have been in the past, as far as going into that Washington game I mentioned about not giving them the benefit of the doubt when it came to like starting off hot. And we've seen them, against Washington and then even against Purdue, start off much better. So I just think that after that Ohio State loss, it was good for them as far as resetting things and getting them to play the way that they need to play. So I have Penn State winning in somewhat comfortable fashion. Maybe it's a slower start in the first half. Maybe Penn State's only up like 10-3 at halftime or something like that. But I don't foresee this being a game that really, really worries me. But
No.
Who knows? I feel like a lot of the time that we come out here, Tim, we say, hey, there was nothing to worry about. You go back to that Bowling Green game, and all of a sudden there sometimes can be. But trying to take my biases aside, I think Penn State wins this one.
But I think also this defense is much better than the 2019 edition, especially in the secondary. I mean, I think that Minnesota game really exposed how leaky that secondary was.
Yeah. And I mean, it just, especially in the Big Ten back then, you weren't playing passing attacks that were that good. The funny thing about that game was it's just kind of like PJ Fleck's DNA. Like once he went up, he just turtle. Like it almost gave the game back to Penn State because he just wanted to run the ball, bleed the clock the entire time instead of opening things up. Because yeah, I think if it would have kept things opened up, like you said, that Penn State secondary back then just wasn't equipped to deal with it. But so yeah, I have Penn State 27-10. You have Penn State 31-13.
Yep.
All right, good deal. Any other final thoughts on Minnesota?
No, just again, it's that 1-0 mentality. Just get in there, get the win, and then it's you have a chance to clinch a home playoff bid on senior day against a team that you've thoroughly owned since they've joined the Big Ten.
Yeah,
minus a couple years here and there.
Sounds like a plan, Tim. So yes, we will. Even though this one is not being, we're not live streaming this one. This was recorded. We will be back to doing these live after the game against Minnesota. So that's a 3:30 kick. So we'll probably be live, hopefully, around 7:00 or so. So make sure that you join us then. As always, make sure that you're subscribing. I believe we're at 133 subscribers. So make sure that you keep subscribing. Make sure you're liking the videos. Tell your friends about it. Show it to your mom. Show it to your dad. Show it to your sisters, your brothers at Thanksgiving. Just bring the podcast out and start playing them at Thanksgiving table. People
smash the like and subscribe button, folks. How many subscribers is that now, Pat? By the way,
have you looked 133.
133. All right, so gotten a few more since the last post game.
Inching our way up to 150. So yes, make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you're liking and continue to follow along. We definitely appreciate it. So we will see you guys on Saturday, hopefully after a Penn State victory.